So, you just bought a new 4K film, but so did your friend. However, they bought a re-released classic in 4K. Let's compare, shall we? So let's say your 4K is the recently released Blade Runner 2049. Slap bang. Previously released in 2017. And let's say that your friend bought 2001 Space Odyssey. Slap bang. The newly released, but classic 1969, maybe 8 film. Either way, it's 50 odd years old, 1968. What's the difference? So Blade Runner was shot in the digital era, meaning that of course you have digital technology and digital cameras that shoot everything without having to use money for film, the physical essence of film, a film reel. But then you've got 2001 A Space Odyssey, which is from the pre-digital era and was shot entirely on film. In this case, both 35mm film, which is the diameter of the size of the film, and 70mm film, which is larger and is still from diameter from corner to corner. Literally 2 times the size. How can both of these films, one from the digital era and one from the pre-digital era, both be 4K Ultra HD? Firstly, some perspective, so I'm going to pick up my script and literally read from it. A 4K digital camera image has a resolution of 4096 by 2160 pixels, 4000 on the horizontal line, hence 4K. Compared this to the regular Blu-ray standard of 1080p of 1920 by 1080 pixels. Since the pixel count increases by the square of the resolution, 4K is roughly 4 times as computationally expensive as 1080p, just like how 8K is 16 times. It is estimated that 35mm film has a digital resolution equivalent to 4K. So if you were to put it into a computer, which they have rendering machines where you literally scan film, the physical essence of film, into a machine, which translates it into a digital format onto the computer, 35mm has a higher optimized rate up to 4K. So it's 4K standard. Like if it was shot digitally, it would just be 4K UHD. 35mm IMAX, which is larger because it's for IMAX cameras, equates to about 6K, so 6000 pixels, while 70mm IMAX is roughly close to 12K, which seems oddly impossible, but that's how the technical specs go. Regardless of how they're shot, most films will be converted into a digital format for editing, no matter what film it is, especially in this current era of digital cameras and digital technology. This is usually for the additional stuff of color grading and visual effects, etc. Additionally, most of these visual effects are already rendered up to a 2K intermediate, which, I mean, in most layman's terms, is pretty much just 1080p at a slightly higher resolution. So most 1080p stuff, say for example, Lord of the Rings trilogy, all of its digital intermediate is, for the special effects, or the digital effects, are a 2K intermediate. While some films are scaled back on a digital or film print for distribution, even IMAX production systems are not capable of playing higher than 4K. So pretty much the highest quality you get for just average projection is 2K. Some cinemas, if you're lucky, they will actually say, as mostly because it's a bragging right, oh, we're going to play this film at 4K because we have the projectors for it, so we're going to show you the 4K version of it because we have it and can play it, because our technology plays by it and works with it. So if a film is shot on film, it can be converted into a digital format like 1080p, 2K, or 4K. Hence, your friend's copy of 2001 A Space Odyssey is labelled as native 4K, as it has been digitally remastered into the 4K format from the original film negative. Does that mean that this copy of 2001 isn't 4K? Like true, actual 4000 pixels? No, it is. It is. That's what it means. If it's all been translated from 35 and 70mm film from its original negative into a computer and rendered at the highest quality that we can currently process it at, and the highest possible quality that it can be processed at, which is 4K. Does that also mean that Blade Runner, a digitally shot film, is also 4K? Yes, because it was shot at 4,000 pixels. It was shot in 4K. Simply put, even physical film can be rendered into a digital process. It's just as simple as that. Like, as much as one may argue that, like, oh, if it's a film from before the digital era, it can't actually be 4K because it's film. But it can be, because if you look at it, every single film you've ever watched is put onto a digital format. So, like, all this stuff here, for example, from before the era when DVDs existed, have been put onto a digital format. Some of them are high definition formats, so like you could get a high definition transfer onto a DVD, very rarely, but often you can. In this case, we're looking at Blu-ray or 4K for high definition, so 720p to 4K. But then DVDs are still standard definition of 480p or 480i. I'm not going to go into those, what the difference between P and I is. It's just a thing for the cameras. It doesn't really matter. The process that these films went under is very similar to how you would take the music off of a vinyl or a record and put it into a computer. It's just the same way, you know. You're taking a transfer from something that already exists, a physical transfer, into a digital format. It's wholeheartedly possible. That's how technology works these days. Realistically, the only real question is it worth getting the 4K master or not? You could technically, yes, go into like looking at the reviews and stuff of it, but it's really all about the mastering. If the mastering works, then it's good. Like, you could put any version of a copy of a film that you found, the original negative or the positive intermediate, and put it straight onto a DVD. That doesn't mean it's always going to look good, because you've always got the scratches and the dirt and the little specks and stuff that be in the dirt and whatever. You'll have all that stuff on the screen. But if your mastering process is really good, aka if the people who are getting paid to edit it into a digital intermediate usually go sometimes extensively into making sure that every single scrap of dirt and everything is cut out of it, and that it's as clean and as crisp as it looks like, and that they can render it to the highest quality available. That's why, for example, you'll have films like Blade Runner 2049, which is digitally, actually no, I should say with 2001 instead, how it's digitally placed onto this disc in 4K with no specks or dirt or whatever, with hundreds of hours probably put into just cleaning it up and also making sure that they can render it in a 4K intermediate. On the other hand, you've got a film like Suspiria, which is, in this case, on a 1080p disc. So this is an average Blu-ray disc, but it is actually a 4K restoration. So they actually went to the effort of cleaning it all up and then render it into a 4K format, only to be putting onto a 1080p disc. So you're still getting the crisp look of a 4K film onto a disc that can still handle that quality and that power, but cannot handle the UHD. So the whole ultra high definition factor of it is cut out of it. You don't have UHD, you just have the 4K quality. You have the best looking version of the film that you can get. Simple as that. I think if there's any benefit to having a film like, say, Suspiria, for example, on 4K, but not being on 4K because it's just a regular Blu-ray, is the fact that you get the ability to watch it wherever and whenever. You don't need to have a 4K player or a 4K TV. It helps. I wouldn't say using upscaling, but that's a whole different story. You can view this film in its perfect 4K glory on a 1080p Blu-ray player. Just an average Blu-ray player allows you the best quality of one standard film, which is pretty good. That's a good way to look at it. So you don't have to invest extra money into getting this ultra high definition picture when you have a pretty good version right here. Now, yeah, you could just buy the DVDs of these versions. You could just buy the Blu-rays of these versions. You don't need to buy the 4K. I'm not saying buy the 4K. I'm just saying this is how the process works. From physical film or digital film rendered into 4K. It's wholeheartedly possible. It's technologically possible. Otherwise, we wouldn't have 2001: A Space Odyssey in 4K. And that's pretty good. So simply put, if the argument is how are they both 4K, it's because of the mastering, it's because of the processing. If you're asking which one looks better, well, that's usually up to the eye of the beholder. You do have professional reviewers who do look at both of these versions of the film. They'll look at every tiny speck of the film, both watching the whole entire film, comparing them, both color and picture and everything, from the megabits in the disc and everything. There's so many specifics and details, and you don't need to worry about that. You can if you want to, doesn't really matter. Like, megabits makes it look smoother and makes it run faster. Like, there's all these different stuff. It's like, does it really matter? It's up to you if it matters. For me, for example, yes. I care if I've got a film like Suspiria in a 4K master. I care if I've got a film like Blade Runner 2049 in a 4K master. I don't need to. I could just have the Blu-rays. It's fine. I don't need to have them. But I choose to. I mean, mostly it's because I had the money to spend on it, but also, like, I'm not going to go around and buy every single one of these films in 4K, for example. I don't need to. It's not always relevant. It's like, it was like the argument back in the day of, which should I get? Should I get the Blu-ray or the DVD? It's like, well, is it like an action or sci-fi or has strong visual effects, or does the special features on the Blu-ray warrant buying it over getting a DVD, which probably has either less to no special features because the DVD disc is smaller in capacity size? It's a whole different thing. Which of course, lastly, I will say, is pretty much the perk of having a 4K UHD disc, is because the 4K UHD, of course, digitally would be a lot more in terms of gigabytes size space than can be handled by a regular Blu-ray disc. Most Blu-ray discs handle up to 50 gigabytes of storage. A 4K film is quite large in file size. So most of the time they may just render a 4K film onto a 1080p disc rather than onto a 4K disc, just so because of the room. And so they can have special features and commentaries and stuff. Like, for example, how this version of Suspiria is a 2-disc edition because it has all this extra special features about both the restoration, but all this extra kind of stuff. So then the feature film is on 1 disc and the special features are on a 2nd disc. So then you have more room for the film to be played at a smoother rate, and everything about it looks much better. Yeah, because then the disc doesn't have to compensate for all the extra stuff that's been put onto it. Yeah, so again, hope this has helped. And additionally, thanks for watching. This has been another video essay thing where I jump around the place and make editing a bitch for myself. No, this isn't about me bragging about what 4Ks I have. I just had my brother come in the other day. By the other day, I mean a few months ago when I actually wrote this script, saying, you know, why should I get something like 2001 on 4K when it doesn't, you know, how does that make sense? Like, I've had people ask me in the past, how does it make any sense for a film, a physical film, to be rendered into 4K? How does that make any sense? And it's just how the process goes. I do actually have a resource, which will be linked in the description, which goes into some detail. Pretty much I've just said what they say in it about the 2K and the 4K and the 8K and the 16K and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. If you want me to do more kind of these video essays, then feel free to like, share, and subscribe for more. Comment if you want me to talk about specific topics like 4K upscaling, for example, which I'm totally happy to talk about. It's personally, I don't have much bias towards upscaling. I don't quite like it. It makes a lot of films just not work as well as they should, because it forces too much out of them. So yeah, if you want me to talk about that, I will. Outside of that, thanks for watching, and I'm going to go to bed. So adios.